Hi all, hope we're keeping safe and well. Today's lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to actually move on a couple of scenes and miss a few of them out. So we ended last lesson looking at Act 2, Scene 3, which is where Romeo meets with Friar Lawrence to arrange the marriage. What follows are a couple of scenes where both characters start to get prepared. Romeo has a scene with his friends Mercutio and his cousin Benvolio, where they have a lot of like bawdy man talk, and they're interrupted by the nurse, who wants to get the information to pass back to Juliet, which is in Act 2, Scene 5, where Juliet is told about the plan to meet at Friar Lawrence's cell. So we have Scene 4 and Scene 5, where they're just preparing for the marriage. And we're not going to go into too much detail in those at the moment. What we are going to do today is have a look at Act 2, Scene 6, which is the marriage of Romeo and Juliet, which, considering it's one of the huge plot points in the story, is actually a fairly short scene. So we're going to have a look at that today. Okay, so where to begin with the marriage scene? Now, obviously, this is a crucial part of Romeo and Juliet's relationship. We looked at Act 2, Scene 2 in a lot of detail, the balcony scene where Romeo professes his love for Juliet and Juliet professes her love for Romeo, and they talk about making these solemn vows to each other, the fact that marriage is a sense of loyalty and a commitment for life, particularly in this contextual time when we're talking about a time when divorce wasn't particularly legal and very much frowned upon. Certainly we've got in Italy, where the story is set, we've got a very Catholic tradition where divorce was still illegal. So this is a very, very solemn and important moment of making promises to each other. We also have the fact that this is done in secret. Neither of the parents know about it, and none of the other family members know about it. The only other two people who are aware of what is going on are the nurse and Friar Lawrence, these two people that Romeo and Juliet have been able to confide in. Juliet with a nurse who's more like a substitute mother figure, and Romeo with Friar Lawrence who's more like a substitute father figure. So it's a really important scene to show their loyalty and their love for each other. And also the fact that it's done in secret helps to build up the suspense and tension for the rest of the play. Okay, so as the scene begins, we just have Romeo and Friar Lawrence waiting for Juliet's arrival. We have a lot of foreshadowing at the start of this scene, looking towards the rest of the play and what is going to happen with Romeo and Juliet's relationship. The friar starts with this phrase, "So smile the heavens upon this holy act, that after hours with sorrow chide us not." So he's essentially saying, may God smile down upon what we are doing here, so that nothing bad, no sorrow will occur in the future. And that's quite an important line, thinking about when we look at the rest of the play, what happens and follows. Now, Romeo, we've already spoken about how he's a very passionate character and how he acts upon instinct rather than thinking things through in more depth. And he has quite an interesting speech here. He says, "But come what sorrow can, it cannot countervail the exchange of joy that one short minute gives me in her sight. Do thou but close our hands with holy words, then love-devouring death can do what he dare. It is enough I may but call her mine." Now, what Romeo's saying here is, the minute that she is in my presence, death can do what he wants because I am with her, and that will make me happy. He says, it is enough that she is mine. It's enough that I can call her my bride. I don't need anything more than that. So he's quite passionate and over the top in this, in the sense that he's looking and saying death can do what it wants with me. Now, knowing from the prologue and saying that these star-crossed lovers take their life, we have these hints of death throughout the play, and Romeo is saying there, as long as she is my wife, death can do what it wants with me. Quite a loaded phrase, if you like, and a lot of heavy foreshadowing here. Now, the friar offers him a piece of advice before Juliet enters, which is this: "These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die, like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. The sweetest honey is loathsome in its own deliciousness, and in the taste confounds the appetite. Therefore love moderately, long love doth so. Too swift arrives as too tardy as too slow." Okay, so what the friar is getting at here is that to be so passionate and so reckless and so rash is actually a bad thing. You have to be moderate in your love. You have to be thoughtful and caring in your love. And this is a really famous phrase. It's a really useful one to remember. We talk about contrasts throughout the play and how the balance of love and hate, life and death, light and dark. Or what we have is these violent delights have violent ends. So saying if this love is passionate and violent, and violent's an odd way of describing it, but explosive love, if you like, it will end violently, which is a foreshadowing of what might happen later on in the play. He says your love is a lot like fire and powder. What he means is gunpowder, so that when the spark is lit, this passionate spark, it causes an explosive reaction. Again, a really interesting quote to be able to work with. He says the sweetest honey can be loathsome in its own deliciousness. Something can be so sweet it could make you sick. You need to be careful with this. And he ends with love moderately. Long love doth so. Too swift arrives, as tardy as too slow. So saying being too reckless and too open with your love straight away is as bad as not doing it at all. So some advice from the friar here is thinking about being careful with your love. Okay, so following on from this advice of the friar to take things slowly, that your love will be explosive and burn out too quickly if you're too rash. This is immediately followed by Juliet entering, and the stage description is fast, somewhat fast, and embraceth Romeo. So you have this direct contradiction of what the friar is saying, the passionate speed at which these two lovers have found each other, and how quickly they've reached this conclusion. And Romeo responds with, "Oh, here comes the lady, also light of foot, will ne'er wear out the everlasting flint." So he's using the friar's metaphor of gunpowder and flint here, because the flint is used to strike to start a spark. So he talks about it being everlasting love. He talks about the idols on a wanton summer air, and yet not fall. So light is vanity. So he's talking about how their love is light and airy, rather than this dangerous thing that the friar seems to think it is. Juliet again uses an imagery of death in her description. She talks about the friar being her ghostly confessor. So the fact she uses the word ghostly is quite significant. It might have impressions of something that's going to happen in the future. And Friar Lawrence says that Romeo shall thank thee, daughter, for us both. So immediately what we're seeing with Juliet's arrival is that the friar's words of these violent delights have violent ends are being hinted at in the way that Juliet and Romeo are behaving. They're both very much passionate and speedy and quick in starting this relationship. Okay, so the final part of this scene, we have Romeo and Juliet emphasising their equality in this relationship. So we know from the prologue that they are from two households, both alike in dignity, and the fact that there is no sort of dominant person in this relationship is meant to symbolise their equality and their perfection and their pairing nature between the two of them. So we have Juliet said, "As much to him, else his thanks too much. I'll give him equal thanks, so we're even." So there's a balance between them. They're a perfectly matched couple, and that's emphasised through the way they speak to each other, the perfection of their language, but also the way that they behave and the way that they love each other is symbolised in that perfection. We have Romeo saying, "Juliet, if the measure of thy joy be heaped like mine, and that thy skill be more, to blazon it, then sweeten with thy breath thy neighbour air, and let rich music's tongue unfold imagined happiness that both receive in either by this dear encounter." So what we have is Romeo describing this as a dear relationship to him, and the fact that his joy is heaped. We have him suggesting that his joys are piled upon each other, so that he has almost everlasting joy that he hopes will last forever. He talks about everlasting love in the previous section that we just looked at. Juliet again continues with, "Conceit more rich in matter than in words, brags of his substance, not of ornament. They are but beggars that can count their worth. But my true love is grown to such excess, I cannot sum up half my wealth." So Juliet is using this metaphor saying, my love is like wealth piled up high, and I cannot even sum up half of it, how much I feel for you at this very moment. So the pair of them are using this passionate language, which the friar has been warning against at the start, saying you have to take things carefully. These violent delights can have violent ends. It could be loathsome in its deliciousness. It could be too much too soon for you too. But Friar Lawrence, he almost goes against what he says, because they then leave to have the wedding ceremony by saying, come with me and we'll make short work, for by your leaves you shall not stay alone till the Holy Church incorporates two into one. So he says, come with me now and we'll make short work of this. This is a very simple ceremony and we can do it very quickly. So actually the friar is not really following his own advice there. But then we have this idea of the Holy Church incorporating two into one, making them into one person, if you like, in holy marriage. And we have all that links back to what Romeo's describing Juliet in Act 1, Scene 5, like a holy shrine, and lots of religious images, an angel and angelic. So we have this joining of the two characters. Okay, structurally, it's quite significant that Shakespeare chooses to end Act 2 with the marriage scene. So if you think about the structure of the play, what we have so far is Act 1 is all about building up the relationships between the two families, and the two characters as being a bit isolated and a bit out of their own families, if you like, with Romeo lovesick for Rosaline, Juliet not sure about the important impending marriage to Paris, and then by the end of Act 1 we have them meeting at this party and realising that they're from the two different households. Act 2 is all about their relationship and how it builds. We have the opening of the act where Romeo sneaks back into the party, Scene 2 where we have them professing their love for each other, the arrangement of the marriage, the go-betweens, the messengers, and then it ends with the marriage ceremony at the end of Act 2. Now what we have now is we've gone from Act 1 with these two separate characters. Act 2 we have these characters being joined together. Act 3, when we start to look at it, goes in a completely different direction, and we start to see a different reaction to this. So very interesting that Shakespeare chooses to end Act 2 with this moment, because it's possibly the happiest moment in the entire play. We have the two characters who are joined together. They feel optimistic about the future. They're very much deeply in love with each other. And from this point, we almost have a turning point in how the action starts to unravel and starts to unfold from here. So very interesting, the choice to end Act 2 on this positive, happy note, compared to the dramatic end of Act 1 where it's the realisation that they're from two different households who are supposed to hate each other, and very much different to the start of Act 3, which we're going to be looking at next time. Okay, there's two activities I'd like you to try with this scene. The first of which is to have a look at the first part of the scene where Friar Lawrence is giving advice to Romeo, and I'd like you to find three key quotations that look at attitudes towards love. So if this was me, some quotations that I would particularly look at are things like, these violent delights have violent ends, the sweetest honey can be loathsome in its own deliciousness. And see if you can find another one or maybe even two that show the friar's attitudes towards love and about the nature of being too hasty and about taking your time with love. The second activity I'd like to consider is looking at what evidence do you have of foreshadowing potential events later on in the play. Now that might be a written response, or it might just be a couple of notes thinking about this is where I think the play is going based on what is foreshadowed within this scene. So those two activities are just going to come up in a second. If you stay tuned at the end, we've got today's film recommendation. For today's film recommendation, I've gone for a comedy classic, which is some of the finest one-liners in all of cinema, and that is Airplane. Very much a pastiche on the disaster movie, and it's so cleverly done. In fact, what they did, they had a script for a disaster film that they just took and completely flipped it into a comedy. It's got some fantastic one-liners, some amazing set pieces, and it really, really holds its humour really, really well, despite being from 1980. So I would heartily recommend it. Go and check it out. Next video we're going to be looking at is the start of Act 3, and obviously where the whole plot starts to unravel. Until then, take care, and obviously any questions, drop me an email.